Good afternoon or evening to everyone, depending on where you are in the country. My name is Meg Fowler. I'm a project scientist at NCAR, and I'm also a member of the AMS Committee on Hydrology. And I am thrilled to welcome you to the first Their Career, Their Stories event of the year. The AMS Hydrology Subcommittee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion hosted a successful town hall at this year's annual AMS meeting called Her Career, Her Stories. It was a panel of 5 amazing speakers that addressed a number of issues surrounding being a woman in STEM, through sharing their own experiences and advice with the audience. Given how successful that event was, we decided to hold more panel discussions like that throughout the year, rather than waiting until the next annual AMS meeting. Today's panel will focus on the stories and experiences of early career scientists in particular. This last year has really highlighted and exacerbated so many of the issues that those of us face just starting out in our career. We hope today's discussion gives everyone an opportunity to reflect, share, and come together as one to support and encourage each other on the professional journey. With that, I'm happy to introduce Melissa Wrzesien, who will help us in moderating the discussion today. Melissa, take it away.
All right, thank you, Meg. Hi, everyone. So as Meg mentioned, my name is Melissa Wrzesien, and I'm also a member of the AMS Committee on Hydrology. In today's webinar, we are going to start with a few questions that we've prepared for the panelists. But we really want this event to be as interactive as possible between the panelists and attendees. So we do encourage all attendees to submit questions in the chat. You should have access to that. You feel free to either submit your questions as they come up to everyone, and Meg and I will monitor the chat and we'll read the questions aloud. If you would prefer to ask something anonymously, please send your question directly to me in the chat, and I will not mention your name when I read the question aloud. Whichever format you prefer. We hope you will feel comfortable asking our panelists about their experiences and their careers in hydrology. So now back to Meg with introductions for today's panel.
Thanks, Melissa. So we're very fortunate today to be joined by another amazing set of inspiring panelists for the event. We have Dr. Raha Hakimdavar from Ball Aerospace, Mimi Hughes from NOAA's Physical Sciences Lab, and Dr. Mimi Hughes and Dr. Lauren Lowman from Wake Forest University. And before we get to the Q&A section, we thought we'd give each of our panelists about 3 to 4 minutes to introduce themselves and tell us a bit more about their own career paths. So I will stop sharing my screen so that you can see everyone a bit better. And to start, I'll hand the mic over to Dr. Lauren Lowman.
Thank you, Meg and Melissa. Thank you all for having me here today. So my name is Lauren Lowman, and I am an assistant professor at Wake Forest University. I am in my 3rd year, so I started my position here in 2018. The path that I got here is not the typical path that I think someone takes to this career. So my PhD and master's are in civil and environmental engineering from Duke University with a focus in hydrology and fluid dynamics. And my research really focuses on looking at how vegetation responds to extreme events. But I actually started as an undergrad student who majored in public policy studies. Sorry, just making sure that everyone can hear me. Sorry. Yeah, so I started as a public policy major, and when I finished my bachelor's, it was around the time that the stock market crashed. There weren't a lot of jobs, and I was planning to go into some sort of government or nonprofit position. That's sort of the trajectory that I initially saw for myself. But while I was an undergrad, I became really interested in doing research. And with that, I started thinking, well, maybe I'll go into a PhD or some sort of research position, but let me do a little bit more with this. And so I took a position with an economist and started doing behavioral economics research, looking at socioeconomic inequality around the US. And with that, I started getting into more stats, and I started taking auditing math classes at the university that I was working at the time. And I really enjoyed math, I found, which I didn't know before. And that sort of led me to end up applying and getting accepted into a master's program in civil and environmental engineering. So that's sort of the meandering path. And if anyone has more questions about what that looks like, I'm happy to answer, but I'll also pass it on to our next panelist.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Raha, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Well, there are a lot of parallels between my meandering path and Lauren's meandering path. So we might have some things to, I'm sensing a pattern here. So as Meg mentioned, I'm the director of space sciences at Ball Aerospace, which is a relatively very new role for me. So I'll talk about kind of what brought me here, which is just very interesting. So I started out as a structural engineer after my bachelor's was also in civil engineering. And I just really liked, I really liked the environmental side and I really liked the structure side. And I ended up just getting a good job, a very interesting position in structural engineering. And what I really liked about it at the time was that it was the field within civil engineering that was the least, had the least number of women in it. So actually, I don't know, that kind of like inspired me more of, yeah, why not? That it's cool and it's very, very highly technical, and really enjoyed the challenge of it, but felt the call to go back and really focus on the environmental side of engineering, which I had studied. And I went to do initially just a master's at Columbia and was still in the civil engineering program. And actually, I applied to two programs. I really wanted to go to Columbia and I really wanted to move to New York City. The program I wanted to get into was an environmental policy program. I didn't, and then as a kind of a backup, I was like, well, I should apply to the engineering one too. And I did not get into the policy program, but I did get into the engineering program. So I went, and actually it ended up being one of the best things for my career and for my life, because I found such a passion in research, which I really, I came from a very practical engineering background and hadn't been as exposed to the opportunities around research and how much there is for us to really do. So I, was lucky and was able to secure funding to stay and do a PhD to continue on this kind of passion around research. And what I focused on was the relationship between relationship between land cover and land use change and hydrology. And I did some work in the tropics, in the Caribbean, did some work in urban areas. So really interesting kind of parallels around different questions around those topics. And then I did end up going into a policy world. I was selected into a program called the Presidential Management Fellowship, which all of you, if you, depending on what point in your career are, it's an amazing program that is open to those with advanced degrees, master's, PhD, to join the federal government. And I joined the U.S. Forest Service as a hydrologist, and also got an opportunity to go to NASA Goddard for a time, and then went back to the Forest Service and did a lot, kind of building out the position that I wanted to really have, which was at that intersection of the management and the research and the policy, and of course bringing in the remote sensing side. So had just an amazing experience there, and then that all of this led to an opportunity that came up to join Ball Aerospace and really go full force into the space side of things, and to go, in a way, really come full circle in connecting the engineering and the science parts of my background and my interests. So that's where I am now, and I look forward to just chatting a bit more with the panelists and with everyone else and your questions. So really excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thanks, Raha. Really cool to hear about y'all's career paths like this. Mimi, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Meg, and thank you, the Hydrology Committee, for the invitation. I appreciate it. There are a lot of parallels between my sort of what I was thinking about this, and I decided to call it a serendipitous journey, which is sort of similar to what I heard Raha and Lauren talk about, how there was some sort of, choosing of the path along the way as you sort of see the opportunities in front of you. So I actually, I'm currently a research meteorologist at NOAA, so I'm not technically a hydrologist, but I do work on the hydrometeorological modeling and applications team, so my work is very hydrologically focused. And I got here, I actually, sort of when I was a teenager, I knew I really loved puzzles and math, and I also really loved to be creative. And so I actually started off in the architectural engineering program at Penn State University, thinking that that was going to be the perfect blend of the things that I love to do. And then I think in my sophomore year, I had an electrical engineering professor who was just really fantastic, and he loved it that I kicked the butts of all the guys in my engineering class and really inspired me and encouraged me. And I ended up doing an honors thesis with him. So I switched from architectural engineering to electrical engineering, basically so that I could work more closely with him. And I really loved the work I was doing. We built, I worked with a grad student that summer, and we were building Rayleigh LiDAR basically from scratch. And I was just an undergrad, so I just had one tiny little piece of that huge project, but it was really fun. But at the same time, I realized that as I was doing the research, he had me looking at some turbulence in sort of the mesosphere, stratosphere, upper atmosphere. And I realized I wanted to be sort of closer to the ground. So I decided to get my PhD. When I applied to PhD programs, I did actually apply to some engineering programs, but on one of the visits, one of the professors I talked to said, hey, if you're interested in atmospheric science, you should really apply to UCLA. And I was like, well, okay. And I did that. And it turned out that that was actually the right fit for me when I visited the schools. I really connected with a few of the professors there, and I felt a connection to that program, which is actually very climate change focused. It turned out that that was one of the things that I was really passionate about the environment. So I went to UCLA for my PhD. I still didn't really have a long-term career in mind. I got my PhD and decided I wanted to live in Boulder afterwards, sort of regardless of whether I was working at NOAA or at NCAR or at Starbucks. I didn't really care. I just was moving to NOAA or to Boulder because that's where my family was. But I got a postdoctoral fellowship at NOAA, and I have sort of been there ever since. So in a way, it's all sort of been like me just sort of following where my opportunities presented themselves and sort of finding the right fit for me along the way. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Yumi, and thanks, Lauren and Raha as well. So just a reminder to everyone in the audience, you are more than welcome to submit your questions via chat. You can do so anonymously by sending them to Melissa directly. But to kick things off, I want to go ahead and get started with a question that we had on the committee, which deals with work-life balance. So I think a lot of us are struggling with this right now. Have you found a level of work-life balance that works for you as an early career scientist? And do you have any suggestions for how to do so? So I'll go ahead and open that up to the three of you.
I'm happy to take a stab at this first. So I will say pre-COVID, I got really good at work-life balance, and then COVID completely derailed me for a period, and I feel like now I'm starting to find my footing and my way back. But I'll explain to you first pre-COVID, and then maybe say what I'm doing now. But yeah, pre-COVID, I was able to find a really good work-life balance. And I still do a lot of these things now, but I would say that just keeping work and life as separate as possible is sort of what works for me. So when I'm working, and when I'm not working, I'm not working. And I really try hard not to bring work home with me. So once I leave the office, which definitely varies day to day, because some days I'll work later, but there's something I really want to finish up, or and some days I'll leave a little bit earlier if I sort of meet all of the goals that I had for that day. But as soon as I go home, I don't open my laptop. I don't respond to emails. I just sort of disconnect, and I just spend that time with my family. And weekends, I try to do the same. Obviously, sometimes it bleeds over into the weekends, and I try to be really intentional about it. If I know that it's coming up, then I tell my family about it and sort of let them know, hey, I'm going to be working this time, on a Saturday, but then the rest of the time is yours. So that's what sort of has worked for me in terms of managing that work-life balance, is just really not bringing work home with me, and when I know I'm going to be doing home stuff, just focusing on that. Now, or since COVID, right, well, for a while I wasn't able to go into my office. So separating work from home became really hard. So then it became more about hours in the day. It's just sort of like, okay, this is now I'm done working. And so I'm really not going to touch my laptop anymore. Obviously that it's sort of to blur a little bit more. But now that I'm able to come into my office again, it helps. I do still work from home some days. And I will say, I don't know how this is for others, but I do find working from home challenging because it's hard to sort of shut off the what's going on around the house, like paying bills, doing laundry, like all of these other things because it's there. And, same with work, it's hard to sort of focus on, making dinner and eating when you're, thinking like, oh, I should really send this email or write this down. So yeah, I think it's always a struggle, and I definitely some days and weeks I do it better than others. But yeah, my strategy is trying to, make it a concerted effort to spend time with my family, and when I'm at home and do work only when I'm designating those as work hours.
I can go next, Raha. I can't see you until you start talking, and so it's hard to sort of dance this. So I actually thought about, because this is one of the questions that we had ahead of time, I decided I didn't really like the word balance in this phrase, work-life balance. I actually don't necessarily think balance is quite the right thing. I think it's more like having a positive work-life relationship, or like a dance. It's almost like a dance. And I think you can have like a ballet, or you can have a boxing match in between the work-life stuff. And so I really think that, I don't know, I try to keep things on the ballet side of things where it's a little bit more graceful. The only thing, I had like a couple things that came to mind. I do think so I have young kids, and COVID has definitely been a challenge. It's impossible sometimes to untangle working from home with young kids when I'm actually working and when I'm not, when I'm parenting. They're all a big jumble. And I think it's important to sort of prioritize your time so you don't lose yourself in the crazy dance. And that is the way that I sort of maintain my sanity. Is there are things that I have to do to maintain who I am, and I need to make sure that those things happen. And if that means that my kid goes to school today like she did without her jacket, she'll borrow a jacket and it'll be fine, and that's okay. And you have to find, I think it's important to find grace for yourself and also grace for others with this whole, we're all juggling right now. And so I think just allowing yourself that grace is really important, and just really allowing yourself the time for the things you need to do, and give yourself permission for those things. And I think it'll improve all the things you do. So don't feel guilty that you didn't get that work email done, because it will get done, and it'll be fine. So.
Okay, now I'll jump in on that note. I mean, it's like, it's interesting because Lauren and Mimi, the two of you kind of said, yeah, setting your boundaries, right? Knowing what you are willing to spend your time on, but at the same time being flexible, because I think that I mean, life inherently is just unpredictable, right? So you do need to be adaptable. I guess that's a better word. And I mean, I think those are excellent suggestions. This is something I definitely struggle with, work-life balance. I think because, like, many of you, things are interesting. I want to, I at times can take more on. So even outside of outside of just regular direct work related things that are just interesting to me. So I guess the way I try to think of it is much more meta. I don't know, much more kind of like philosophical of it just at every moment, it's your life. Decide how you want to spend it. I mean, like, whatever is important to you. And I guess I would just throw out there too that if you're just really into your work and you don't even consider it to be work and you just love it, you want to spend, it's okay too. I guess I would also throw that out there, that it's fair on all ends of that spectrum, or on anywhere along that spectrum. But just take care and remember, you are human, you're having a human experience, and your work is part of that, and it should be something you're happy with and proud of. And so I think I just try to keep that in mind of what am I really trying to get from my life, and I think that kind of in a way helps to recalibrate a lot of times. It helps me make sure I am setting those boundaries and reassessing, because your life changes, where your boundaries are, how much time you want to spend for, work or professional things or whatever, versus your personal life. That's going to change. Like that, I love that analogy of a dance. That song is going to change, and your ability to do different dance moves are going to change, throughout your life. So the adaptiveness, but also taking care of yourself, is just so important.
It's great. Thank you all so much. I think that's fantastic advice from everyone.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say, Meg, we do have a question in the chat. So someone submitted that the panelists talked about going on to the next opportunity when it presented itself in their introductions. And I'm going to edit this a little bit, because I do feel like all three of you guys did such a nice job presenting that you took what we might call a more winding path, but it still ended up wonderfully. So the question is, how do you know if that's the right way to go, kind of when that opportunity presents itself? Is there anything that you could, I guess, advise other early career, whether student, grad student, whatever? So open for anyone, if anyone really wants to jump in. Mimi, I feel like you laughed at this one, so if you want to take this one.
Well, I always laugh. I don't think you know. I mean, you can't know ahead of time if it's going to be positive. But if you're watching for doors, I think you'll find them. So I think I guess that I don't really know how to respond to that. You can't know ahead of time how something's gonna turn out. Of course, you can listen to your instincts and you can trust your gut. Like when, I talked about choosing grad schools, and I think most of us who are on this call have had some experience like that. And to a large degree, that is like a gut feeling, right? You sort of visit all the schools and you have this sense that you ask a lot of questions, you collect as much data as you can, and you sort of trust your intuition. And sometimes you make a good decision, and sometimes you make a decision that you need to rectify, or that you need to watch for the next door because that door wasn't quite the right one. And I think either way, it works out okay, as long as you keep your eyes open.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mimi. I don't think you can go wrong. I don't think there's a wrong decision. I think that no matter what, it's going to be a great experience and you're going to learn from it. And, a lot of the experiences that I've had, it's not just about learning what I want to do, but also learning what I don't want to do, what things don't interest me as much. And that's just as valuable to know. I guess I'll give a little anecdote. So when I was doing this 1-year research position with The Economist at Duke, so I had applied and I had already been accepted to a PhD program in sociology. And so it was guaranteed, I had a stipend, everything was lined up. And I had this real moment of crisis of, well, is this what I really want to do for the rest of my life? Is this, that's how we all think, obviously. You're not stuck with any one decision that you make, but that's what I was thinking. Is this really what I want to spend my time doing? It's pursuing this PhD in sociology. And so what I did was I emailed a ton of different people who did research that seemed interesting to me, just period. So some people were in meteorology, some people were in engineering, just anyone who did research that seemed interesting so I could learn more about it and sort of come up with and see what the possible career paths are out there, because I didn't really know what else was out there. I just sort of followed what seemed right to me at the time. And I remember having this conversation with my mom when I finally decided I got an offer from who ended up being my PhD advisor, Anna Barros at Duke, to do a master's with her. And right, it was sort of uncertain, so there wasn't like a guaranteed stipend with it. And if it all worked out, I could transition to the PhD program. And I told my mom this, and she was like, "You're giving up a sure stipend to do this." You know, I think it's just sort of context, right? Like my mother didn't get it, and she's my family, and of course I want to make her happy. But I also knew that the right path for me was taking that direction, going in the direction of civil and environmental engineering, because from all of the conversations that I had, meeting with different people, getting a better sense of what was out there at the time, that seemed to align most with my goals and my values. And I think that's the advice I would give, is just sort of all you can do is assess at that moment what aligns best with your goals and values. And you know, it's not always going to make your family happy, or they might not always understand, but you know, you won't regret it if it's, you know, if you make your decisions in that way, I feel. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to add in terms of just you're never going to fully know if it's the right time or the right decision. But actually, really, it's always when it is when you decide it is the right time and it is the right choice, and it will all turn out, because I think the most important thing with very few exceptions in life is it's what you do with that decision. It's not necessarily, oh, I went this route and I did not go. Like, I mean, we kind of all started out, we have had winding paths. It's not a direct path. It's not linear. So all roads, they do, like all of the experiences that you've had, all the things that you've done in your life, they make it back into your life one way or another. So I just think of it as a continuous flow, you know, rather than just binary kind of decisions that will shut doors. And I mean, in a practical sense, definitely, I would say for me, I do the same. I try to just get as much information as possible from as many people as possible, just across the, you know, like personal life, professional, in different fields, and you know, do your research as much as possible. And another thing I like to do is make a pro-con list, because it helps me to see. I'm visual, so it helps me to actually see things mapped out a little bit. And then in the end, it is you know, your intuition is not some mystical thing, that it's based on information. It's based on your life experiences and your values and all of those things. Your intuition is incredibly powerful. So really, I think for me, you know, in the end, I gather the information, I visualize, I do all the things that I can, and I agonize over it. but then it's like, okay, I'm gonna just go with this, and it may not even fit with the advice that I've been given by others, you know, personal or professional life. But that's what I'm gonna go for on that day, and it's all gonna be okay in the end.
It's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, I love the idea of trust yourself and do it. It's the right choice. On that note, do any of you have experiences with imposter syndrome? Is that something that comes up for you when you're in these opportunities, these amazing experiences? Do you know, have any tips, if you do experience, on how we might navigate that, or anything along those lines?
Okay, I'll start, since I've been going the last few times. So, well, yes, every day, all the time, and it's an interesting. I don't know. Maybe we need a different term for it, because it's a sense of you know, it could mean so many things. So when I went from engineering, my practical engineering background, into a research focused, you know, like science program, I felt like, oh, I don't fit. I don't have the same background. It's not obvious why I'm here. And it was actually, a lot of times it was internal, it wasn't external. I was accepted to the program. But in a way I was questioning it, you know, the legitimacy of that decision. And I think maybe that's part of it too, is just trusting that you're there and it's all good. But I definitely going from research, then going into policy, forestry. I didn't have a background in that. There were things I needed to learn. I thought, well, I'm not prepared. Yeah, I maybe someone else would do a better job. And then of course now, going from a largely earth science focus to things that are in a program of work in heliophysics and astrophysics and planetary science. It's awesome. I love it. I mean, but of course, yeah, you can't help but kind of think, well, am I really the right fit? I think, and I would say even way before, when I even got into engineering, I was much more, I think, artistically inclined, actually. So I found that I was not the right fit. I was pretty good at math and science, but I was just excelled at the humanities and the arts. But really, I actually, the way I think of it is that all of those things that make you feel like you're different or whatever are assets. And those are the reasons why you can really contribute. My interest and my background in the arts has been a large, I would attribute that to many of the successes that I've had, because you are able to make connections, you're able to bring certain, and like visualization, I learned how to really visualize my work. Like I learned how to make some nice animations during my PhD. I just did that on the side because I kind of liked it. It was fun. And then I was able to use that to communicate the work that I was doing in a more effective way. So I think focus more on how those things that maybe make you feel insecure are actually assets that you can bring.
I can't see anyone except for myself, but I'll go next, and then Lauren, I saw that you unmuted at the same time. I'm going to keep this really brief. I think everyone experiences imposter syndrome to some degree. I agree that maybe we need a new term for it. I just think some people are maybe better at kind of focusing or trusting to the fact that they're there for a reason, basically. Which is basically what Raha has said. I think that's the key thing, is that, because I have definitely experienced this. I have been doing quite a lot of I've switched around a lot in terms of what my focus has been to some degree. At one point, I couldn't even really tell a cohesive story. I was like, I do hydrometeorology and I do Arctic science. Huzzah, it's all these things. And I couldn't tell people, I couldn't make a cohesive story out of it. And of course, that made me have a lot of imposter syndrome about it. But at one point, you just have to, I think you have to trust that there's a reason you're there. And also that diversity gives you a creative perspective. And that is an asset. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with what was already said. I don't have much more to add to it. I really love this idea of, what makes you different is actually what makes you valuable. And that is 100% true. So you should definitely embrace that. The only thing that I would add, just something that sort of helps me and might help you deal with the feelings of imposter syndrome, because I agree, I think everyone feels this. I think it's really important to define what success means to yourself, because that sort of keeps you from comparing yourself to a bar that doesn't make sense to you. Because if you're always comparing yourself to something that's, a great idea, but not necessarily, in line with what is important to you, then of course you're never going to meet it, and you're not going to, and that will make you unhappy. But, I really focus on reminding myself, well, what is success to me? What are my goals? And am I meeting those? And try not to worry about comparing myself to other people or other things that I see out there, because I am different, and I'm not going to have the same career as someone else, or hit the same milestones as someone else. And so it's really important to remind yourself of that. And of course, maybe there is a big goal that you want to hit, and then you should talk to people about, well, what would I need to do in order to hit that, if that's something that's really important to you. But, otherwise, yeah, just define defining your success for yourself and trying not to measure yourself up against a bar that doesn't necessarily, correspond to what's important to you, because it's easy to forget what's important to yourself when you're like, oh, all these people are doing great things and I want to do those great things too. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Sorry, actually just that made me think of a couple of other things that I wanted to add. One, that maybe it's not a bad thing to have that feeling. Actually, it could, you see, because that's an opportunity for you to learn new things, to grow, to think of creative ways to contribute, add value. So I think just not being afraid of that and just embracing it and saying it's okay, everybody feels it, and it just means I'm in the right place. And then the other thing that I would add in terms of just managing it is everyone's different in how you the kind of feedback that you need and what helps you. So figure out what works well for you. I mean, for some people, like for me, I like to have feedback, and that not constantly, but once in a while I like to check in. I like to have feedback from someone that I'm working with of, how's this going? How can I do more of, support more, and where do you think I can gain more skills, or whatever. So I would also just not be afraid to figure out what it is that would help you manage those feelings, and go out and seek it from those that you can trust, and that will actually give you valuable information that you can then work with.
Those are all really great thoughts. Thank you for sharing. Definitely agree. This is something that I think we all struggle with. So sometimes it's nice to hear that other people struggle with this too, and that it's not just you. We have a question that was submitted during the registration process, and it was, if you could go back, is there anything that you would tell yourself to do differently during your time as a PhD student? If there's anything, I don't know who submitted this question, but maybe you could even think, grad school wise, life wise during your PhD, anything that you would do different looking back now.
I can start. I can't see anyone else at this point. My computer's frozen, but I think you can hear me still. I guess both during my PhD and after, and I'll just keep it really brief, I think I would try to be really deliberate with my yes to things. I think it's more or less something that I think I've struggled with more post-PhD than during my PhD, because I feel like during your PhD, you can get sort of really focused, and I think that is a really positive thing. And then after your PhD, the focus just goes, and there's all of these things, all of these opportunities, and I said yes to too many of them, I think, maybe at first, because maybe I was afraid to say no to any of them, because I might be passing something really awesome up. But I think if you get too diffuse too quickly, that can be a real struggle. And then I think this has come up before, but just sort of really focusing on the aspects that what you enjoy, and trying to really hone in on what brings you joy, if you will, or like what really drives you in your job, and then you can create your path to fit that, I think, if you are intentional and careful and watch for the doors. So I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I read this question before the panel, and I was actually, like, my initial reaction to it was, well, no, there's actually nothing I would change about, what I was doing during my PhD or anything that I did. But so I thought maybe I'd focus more on the things that I did do that I would suggest that other people do, because I think they're really good. The first is just keeping in contact with people that I met while I was a PhD student, if I went to conferences and, talked to people at their posters or went to their talk and met up with them afterwards, just staying in regular contact with those people, because honestly, now that I'm an assistant professor, a lot of those people are my best colleagues and collaborators, because we sort of had a mutual interest. We've had all this time to sort of talk about our ideas, and now, we have the ability to work together. So yeah, I maybe I could have done even more of that. Maybe I would have even more potential collaborators now, but yeah, definitely just stay in contact with the people that you meet. And the other thing is writing down ideas that you have, because you will have a lot of good ideas as a PhD student for research or, potential projects or, potential applications. And, you don't have the time to work on it because you're trying to finish your PhD work. So write down those ideas, because once you finish, you might find an opportunity, or maybe it'll be a really good idea to write for a, like a postdoc fellowship, or, so keep all of those ideas that you have, because I guarantee there's a time when you can find a use for them, and it will be a huge benefit for you.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome that you all positive things. Okay, so I'm going to share one thing that I did do right that might be helpful for others, and that was applying two things to opportunity. There are a lot of opportunities open to you that you may not even be aware of. That may take some digging when you're a PhD student. That can really impact your life. That can help you build out your network, give you new ideas. Yeah, so I applied for a Fulbright and was successful in securing one. So of course, yeah, I applied to many things that I didn't get as well, but all of that is really good experience. Also, if you are going into a career path that's going to require you to do writing, to advocate for your own work, which could be almost anything, is that actually. If you go into the policy side, it's going to be that. If you go into academia or research, you're going to be applying for grants and so on, and even private sector, really all it's going to require you to do that. Yeah, so one of the best things that I did was go to the Netherlands and study how the Dutch manage water and ways that we could learn, and that has been a long life network for me. I mean, I really had very little exposure to the Netherlands before, and just has been such an amazing community for me to remain a part of, because they're very active, of course, in hydrology and largely in disaster related water related issues and solutions. So yeah, I think that was many other programs like the Presidential Management Fellowship that I was able to get into. There's a AAAS fellowship. There's the AMS Summer Policy Colloquium. There are lots of things out there depending on what your interest is. So I definitely got that one right. In terms of, and it's something that I would do differently is, giving myself more credit. And that goes back maybe to some of the previous things that we said, but yeah, really claiming that during and after your PhD is an amazing time, and you really are exploring a lot of things that many others don't, have the time to explore. So your ideas are valid, dear. And I love that, Lauren, you mentioned writing down those ideas that you had, because I think of that time, both like during and after. I was just such a sponge. I was so open to making all these connections, and I came up with so many great ideas, that then if I would have given myself more credit, I may have followed through on more. But I mean, yeah, you're going to have your entire career to continue doing that work and moving those things forward. So yeah, just enjoy it, and don't forget you're part of yeah, your value added to that system and the work that you're doing. So really take advantage of it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you all for that. So we only have about 15 minutes left, so I think we can do one more question that's been submitted from the audience. And just to end on, I guess, somewhat of a hopeful note, what are things that you think the STEM community might be able to do to best support early career scientists? Is there anything in particular that you've seen work well or not work, or been thinking about?
I'll start this off. So yeah, what can the community do well? That's a hard question because, right, we don't have control over the community. The community just sort of exists. So yeah, we can make suggestions, but I think that there are a lot of things the community is currently doing really well, and things that you can do to help yourself as an early career scientist. And I would say the biggest thing for me is mentorship. So getting, identifying mentors, and, a lot of professional societies, AMS included, have these mentorship opportunities where you can link yourself up with a mentor. And that's, one of the best things that you can do, just to sort of meet someone new, get their perspective. And you should have, you should try to find mentors at different stages of their career, not all in the same stage. Maybe someone who's just like a little bit ahead of you, and then someone mid-career, and then someone much farther along, so that you have that mix of perspectives, because obviously times change, and being an early career person now is not what it looked like even a decade ago. So it's just helpful to get that perspective from multiple people. And your mentors can help you in a lot of different ways. I mean, if you have questions about, say, work-life balance, which I agree with Mimi is not a great descriptor, it's more like, yeah, how to keep your sanity is probably a better way to put it. But, they can help you, if you want to just talk about that, or get their suggestions or ideas. And also, yeah, like Raha said, right, reaching out to someone just to sort of get feedback. Am I doing the right things right now? If this is where I want to be in the next 1 to 5 years, those are all the questions that you can ask your mentors. And I will say that, like, when I think about mentorship for myself as an early career person, I have people within my institution at Wake Forest, so within my department, outside my department, in administration, not in administration. I have people outside of my institution that are, in academia, but also people outside of academia. And you don't have to like tell them that they're your mentor, that, they're serving as your mentor either. You don't have to like say, hey, will you be my mentor? It's just someone that maybe you met and you connect with and you feel comfortable talking to. And when you have a question, you just, reach out and have a phone call or a Zoom call, or, if it's not COVID times, get coffee with, and just have a conversation. And that's really, to me, that's been really helpful as I've gone along, to just have those sort of touch points with people that I look up to, or who are doing great things, or, who are also, and this is where it's really important for you to define success for yourself, because you also have to like be able to separate their advice from what makes sense to you and what you want to achieve, because not everyone's going to have your same goals. But yeah, I'll leave it with that, what the community can do and what you can gain from the community is mentorship.
Yeah, a few things come to mind. One, I think that the community, broadly, should pay attention to what's going on. Communities change and adapt all the time. So events like this are really important, really fantastic. Sub-communities within communities are really important. And then, other things that one of the most important aspects of any kind of community group or organization is elevating voices as well. So, I mean, yeah, of course, an event like this, but we have this opportunity in so many other ways. Elevating someone's research, someone's ideas, even, just a person that you think may not be getting opportunities and could use some support. So I think, we're all contributing members of multiple different communities, and really taking that role kind of, seriously, and seeing that you can have and you can influence and shape whatever group that you're a part of. I think that is a really important thing, that it should reflect the values of those that are part of that community, because believe it or not, that doesn't always happen, right? We know that a little bit. So yeah.
So I guess we had this question ahead too, the thing that I wrote down is I think we need to sort of And I do agree with all the things that have already been said. In particular, I'm a huge fan of mentoring, and especially formal mentoring programs I think are very useful. I think we need to keep up the push for sort of systemic and cultural change in the earth sciences in general, to encourage more inclusive behaviors from everyone and to discourage behaviors that ostracize groups. I think we can all work, and this is something that we can do both as individuals and with a community, work toward becoming more like active allies of marginalized groups. And I think we need to do this. It's a cultural shift that's happening, and I think we need to make sure it continues. And I encourage you all to watch the Picture a Scientist documentary about women in geoscience if you have the chance. So that's all I'm going to say.
It's great advice. Yeah, there's always more work to be done, but it's good to see some positivity. So with the last 8 minutes left in this webinar, I'd like to give each of our panelists some time for any final remarks that they would like to offer us, any advice or just general information and helpful advice, I guess, for the rest of us. So we'll do one more round robin, and you're welcome to take a few minutes. So to start, let's hand it over to Mimi.
Okay, I think I'll keep it brief. I had one more thought. There was a question that we didn't talk about that was submitted regarding sort of how to interact positively, like what to do with sort of master's level people versus PhD level people. And I think this also relates to that comment that I had about sort of inclusive behaviors, because I think this is, I'm not convinced that the ivory tower has the most positive, it's not the most positive model of how we can treat the people we work with. And I also think that this was an important lesson that took me a little bit longer than I think it should have. And so I think it's just important to recognize the values that everyone you work with brings and see those. And at the same time, you can recognize by getting back to the imposter syndrome, you recognize your own strengths and weaknesses, and that you don't have to be able to do everything. You have to be able to do the things that you want to do and you're good at. And you can find other people who are good at the things that you don't want to do, probably. So we all can work. It just helps us to work more collaboratively, I think, when we stop thinking of ourselves as sort of lone wolves. And so I think I would just like to leave us with that. And then the other thing that took me a while to realize is that it's okay to give yourself space and time to think. I feel like I have a tendency to be always wanting to do the next thing. I need to do the next email, or I need to write the next paper, or I need to code that next little bit of code. And when I have my time, which is limited because I have young kids and I have a job and I have a partner and I have a house and all of these things, I want to prioritize the things that are the doing things, but that comes at a cost, because I think creativity and science is creative work. Fundamentally, creativity needs space, and you have to be able to play a little bit to be creative in your work. So I think giving yourself permission to sort of sit and think and read and take time and not having to be doing the next thing it's just something that that I think that I've learned in the past couple of years and has been pretty valuable. So that's all I'll leave you with.
Excellent advice. Thank you. And next, Lauren.
Yeah, I'll just leave. I love everything that you said, Mimi, but I completely agree. Giving yourself space to think, we definitely don't do that enough. And I'll just add to that, also give yourself grace. And I think that we all tend to be kind of hard on ourselves. And I think it's good to just sort of take a step back and, celebrate every little victory that you have, if it's just something like, oh, I actually got through 3 things on my to-do list today, you know, like just take a moment and say like, wow, I did something really good today. You know, we don't do that enough. I think that, and especially in, you know, academia or as a PhD student, right, we deal with rejection a lot. And so that becomes sort of what we get used to, is just hearing bad news or getting bad news, and, you know, like thinking, oh, well, I didn't do well enough on this. And so just give yourself grace and, you know, instead celebrate all the little things. So if you know, submit a paper, celebrate that, you know, don't worry about what happens afterwards, but just celebrate the fact that you actually, you know, got something out that could be submitted, or, you know, just give yourself grace, give yourself space, and also, you know, celebrate the small wins. And the other thing that I want to leave everyone with is just don't, and I guess going off of what, you know, Mimi was saying about the, you know, how important, you know, being inclusive is, you know, really don't forget the impact that you can have on society, or the work that you're doing can have on society. You should always keep that in the back of your mind, and be ready to act on it. I think that as scientists, sometimes we get really focused on the science and doing and publishing, and we sort of forget about, well, why are we doing this? And how can it help people? Or how can I take a little bit of this to help people? And whether that is, you know, just, hey, maybe I'll, you know, help, I'll be a volunteer judge for like a science fair or some, you know, just always think about and be mindful about what else you can give back. Because, right, by you giving back, you can sort of serve as a role model, or, you know, help someone else who might not realize that this is a career path that they could take. So you could help influence someone else's career trajectory. And, you know, especially, I know we're all thinking about diversity in the field, and, you know, how we, and, you know, diversity is only a good thing, and only leads to more and better ideas. So how can we get more people involved in earth sciences or atmospheric sciences? And, you know, just always be mindful of, yeah, the role that you can play in that, because no matter where you are in your career, you can play that role and impact, and have an impact, and, you know, provide a great benefit to society.
Excellent advice too. Raha?
Well, you said a lot of the things that I was going to say, so that was great. It is important to, yeah, definitely see the value in what you do, and remember what drives you and what your passion is. I went into engineering because I cared about people. I wanted to make the world a better place. And that hasn't, it's not like that just goes away when you start, when you get into the grind of things and you're just doing the day to day. That's still what drives me. And so just remembering that, remember the bigger picture and how you're contributing to that. Stand up and say something. Don't be afraid to do that for yourself or for other people. It is so important. It's always been important. It's going to continue being important. And then lastly, just underlining that point of support other people and celebrate other people and elevate them, because at no matter what point in your career or your life you are, you can always be a support to somebody else. And just keep in mind the importance of empathy. When it's easy to forget that when we focus so much on the technical, on the science, on the engineering, on creating our models and optimizing our models, that you forget there's the human aspect of it, and that empathy is what really should be driving all of our work. So that's the thing that I always, those 3 things that I always keep in mind.
Thank you so much, all of you. Fantastic panelists, and thank you for taking time out of your days to give back to the community this way and share with us some just absolutely fabulous advice. So thank you also to our audience. I'm putting our email up on the screen. If you have any suggestions or things you'd like to see in the future, feel free to reach out to us, and you can keep track of our events on our Twitter and Facebook pages at AMS Hydrology. And with that, it looks like we're ending just about on time. So thanks everyone again, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event.